All right, here we go. My name's Tom Peterson, and I'm here to tell you about the last pet sitting job I'll ever take. Ever. I used to pick up odd jobs here and there, for a little extra money. Dog walking, watering people's plants, watching pets while neighbors were out of town. Nothing serious. I thought I'd seen it all until this one job changed my mind about easy side gigs forever. So this happened last fall, when my mom's old friend, Susan Jacobs, called me up out of the blue. She needed someone to watch her two pets, a black lab named Buddy and a tabby cat named Jasper. She said her sitter canceled on her last minute, and she was desperate since her flight was in a few hours. I hadn't seen Susan in years, but I remembered her as this sweet, no-nonsense lady who used to bring cookies over when I was a kid. She told me she'd pay me well just for a few days. I figured, why not? Extra cash, and she lived in a nice neighborhood just outside the city. I packed up a few things and drove over that same afternoon. When I arrived, the first thing I noticed was the house. A big white colonial style, but it looked older than I remembered, like maybe it had seen better days. The paint was peeling a bit and the lawn was overgrown, which felt off, considering Susan was usually so put together. Susan greeted me at the door, and I could tell right away she was anxious. She was a little out of breath, maybe from rushing around to pack, and she kept glancing over her shoulder at the hallway behind her. She barely even let me get inside before she started explaining everything I needed to know about the pets, their feeding schedule, bedtime, her cell number in case anything happened. But then she got weirdly serious, lowering her voice, leaning in close. "Tom," she said, looking me dead in the eye. "Jasper, my cat. He's got a habit of getting into places he shouldn't." She paused for a second and then added, "If you see him trying to get into the attic, don't let him." Now, I've heard some strange things about pets, sure, but that made me pause. I asked her why, but she just shook her head and said, "It's hard to explain. Just keep him out." Then she practically rushed out the door with her bags like she couldn't wait to get out of there. By now, I was feeling a little off myself. But I shook it off, telling myself it was just her nerves. Maybe she'd had a rough day or something. So I settled in, fed Buddy and Jasper, and then sat down to watch some TV. Buddy was this big, lovable lug, snoring at my feet while Jasper kept to himself, watching me from a corner of the room with those unblinking cat eyes. The first night was fine, I guess. I locked up, fed the pets, and went to bed in the guest room upstairs. But in the middle of the night, I woke up to this weird noise, a faint scratching sound. It was barely there, but enough to snap me out of my sleep. I looked around, trying to figure out where it was coming from. My first thought was Jasper, maybe scratching on some furniture, so I ignored it, thinking he'd settled down. But as I lay there listening, I realized it wasn't just scratching. It was pacing, like footsteps. I sat up, heart pounding, but when I looked around the room, it was just me and Buddy snoring at the foot of the bed. Morning came, and I wrote it off as me just being in a strange place, jumping at sounds I wasn't used to. I spent the day working from my laptop, taking Buddy for a walk and keeping an eye on Jasper, who kept disappearing into different parts of the house. I'd find him sitting on top of the fridge or under the dining table or perched on a windowsill, just staring. But every time I got close, he'd bolt. That night, I was a little more on edge. I double-checked all the doors and windows, then climbed into bed, trying to relax. And sure enough, around 2 a.m., that scratching started again. Only this time it was louder, more insistent, and coming from above me, the attic. I tried to ignore it, pulling the blanket over my head, but it just wouldn't stop. Every time it faded, it would start back up again, like someone, or something, was scratching just on the other side of the ceiling. I told myself it had to be an animal, maybe a raccoon or a squirrel. But then I remembered what Susan had said about Jasper trying to get into the attic, and this cold wave of dread washed over me. I knew I had to check it out. I grabbed my phone and a flashlight, opened the guest room door, and crept down the hallway to the attic stairs. My hands were shaking as I reached for the door, which had one of those flimsy little locks that barely felt secure. I held my breath, turned the handle, and swung it open. The staircase was pitch black, the air thick with dust and that strange musty smell that old houses have. I shone my flashlight up the stairs, taking one slow step at a time, trying not to make a sound. The scratching had stopped and the silence was almost worse, like whatever was up there was waiting for me. When I finally reached the top, I shone my light around the attic. Boxes, old furniture covered in sheets, nothing out of the ordinary. But then, I saw Jasper, sitting in the far corner, his back to me. He was completely still, staring at the wall. I called his name softly, but he didn't react, didn't even turn his head. I took a step closer, and that's when he let out this low, rumbling growl like nothing I'd ever heard from a cat before. It was deep and guttural, almost like he was warning me. My skin was crawling, every instinct telling me to get out, but I couldn't move. I just stood there, watching him as he slowly turned to face me, his eyes reflecting the flashlight like two glowing orbs. And that's when I noticed the wall behind him. There were scratches on it, deep, jagged marks, like something had been trying to claw its way through from the other side. Jasper's growling grew louder, and I realized he wasn't looking at me. He was staring past me, back down the stairs. I turned, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear myself think, and that's when I heard it, a soft shuffling sound coming from the bottom of the staircase. I don't remember much after that. I just remember stumbling down the stairs, locking the attic door behind me, and running back to the guest room with Buddy close at my heels. I barely slept the rest of the night, and as soon as the sun came up, I packed my things and left a note for Susan, telling her I was sorry, but I couldn't stay. She called me later that day, thanking me and telling me that Jasper was fine, back to his normal self. But before she hung up, she added, "By the way, Tom, did you happen to go into the attic?" I lied and said no, that I never opened the door. She was silent for a moment, and then she said, "That's strange. I found some new scratches on the wall up there, and I don't know how to explain it, but they were on the inside, like something was trying to get out."